Hello, and welcome to the most ambitious bundle of mods I've ever stitched together. Some of these are mods that I made myself, or patched together specifically for the Ancients series, which is why the list won't be available as a Wabbajack or Nexus collection. This video is intended more to be an inspiration for your own list, an explanation for some of my design choices, and something I can point to answer the inevitable "how did you get your game to look like that?" questions. I'll also be limiting the scope of this video to the visuals. Weather, trees, city mods, notable texture packs, maybe some animals, things like that. In part to keep potential spoilers to a minimum, though you will have likely seen at least one big quest mod featured in the Ancients trailer, and in part because it's difficult to show things like Sunhelm, for example, on camera. These mods won't be in installation order, for the most part, largely because this list went through multiple phases of tweaking and tinkering until I got here, and I don't remember the installation order at this point. This list also wasn't necessarily balanced for the most cutting-edge visuals or modern combat and gameplay. It's balanced for, I'm trying to tell a story about characters in a world that I love, so I want it to run smoothly enough and fit the vibe enough to do that. As such, I will not be taking further mod suggestions. Say again, I will not be taking further mod suggestions for this series. Not even from my patrons, who have been getting updates while I've been plotting evil plots and testing this monstrosity. Not my sneakiest segue ever, but it'll do. Thank you very much, friends. With all that said, enjoy this tour of a Skyrim that I've tried to make feel, well, ancient. I'll start in maybe an unconventional place, but it's the shortest chunk of this list. I'm using a pretty minimal reshade, based on Da Vinci's lookup table, and serving mostly to make things more visible after rendering and YouTube's compression. I'm also using a several generations outdated version of community shaders from back when the UI still looked like this, in part because it runs better with this setup than even the version I was using for my last series, and in part because I like the way the puddles look in this version of wetness effects better than in later versions. I also don't really care for upscaling, PBR, or complex parallax, the latter two because they tend to give me motion sickness for whatever reason, so any textures mentioned later in the video that have parallax in the mod title, just note that I'm not actually using the parallax parts of them. All of them still hold up anyway. For lighting, I've gone with the new kit on the Nexus, Relight, along with Ember Veil lighting, which is not spelled the same way as it is in Enshrouded, but it's very close, and I just had to. Because it will come up and is something visual that doesn't really fit anywhere else, I'm using Dear Diary UI along with the wooden pad, which just fits both the series and my own general aesthetic. While not technically fitting into any of these categories, I am of course using Dindolod 3 for all the distance stuff. I just didn't know where else to mention it. For weather, I've moved away from my long-beloved Obsidian Weathers and Seasons and gone with Azurite 3 by the same author. I love how the nights look, especially with Rally's Celestial Canvas. The mod Moons and Stars is making a reappearance in this list, as are Shooting Stars, Splashes of Storms, and True Storms, the last of which I've made my own compatibility patch for, so it works alongside Azurite 3, Storm Lightning, and Rain Song. A few of Rain Song's loops are a little too hissy for my ears, so I used a mix of the sounds I liked best from all three mods in my patch. Give it a listen. I'm also using EVLAS, Enhanced Volumetric Lighting and Shadows, and a tweaked sun position for some late summer, early autumn flavor. This is not a mod that works with later versions of community shaders, just so you know. For water, I'm using my old faithful, Realistic Water 2, with my own watercolor patch based on Ilinalta to make at least some of it look like the rivers I've seen around my own neck of the woods. Or mountains, rather. Natural Waterfalls is also making a glorious return, and I've introduced a smallish mod called Half Moon Creek, which fixes Lake Ilinalta having 2 outflow points, and which will now be a permanent fixture in my game. There will also be another water logic fix later in the list. I'll show you when we get there. Moving on to the bones and roots of the world, which is maybe what I spent the most time tweaking in this mod list. Grass has been toggled off for the moment so you can see what's underneath. Everything was built on top of Skyland all in one, but most of it has been overwritten. An old version of Enhanced Rocks and Mountains and Northern Shores are making a reappearance once again, and I'm using the familiar textures from Tamrielic Landscapes for Hjalmarch's Frozen Marsh. Eastmarch is covered primarily by my own Badlands textures, while the Whiterun Mammoth Steppe uses textures from Vanaheimr Tundra. Mountains, mines and caves, and snow are also covered by Vanaheimr, while the Reach and Rift use Mysterious Dawns textures. Roads and bridges are covered by Dirt Roads and Dirt Bridges for Skyrim, using a combination of whichever dirt textures from the previously mentioned mods were the least visually distracting, including this muddy one from Skyland that I had to have in because it's just so squishy. I've walked in that nonsense before. A+ texture, Sky King, I love it. Glaciers and most of the exterior ice are covered by a combination of Icy Mesh Remaster, Real Ice and Snow, the ice-only version, and Vanheimr Ice for the Forgotten Vale. There's one ice texture, this one, from Tamrielic Landscapes because it's just my favorite. Interior ice caves are covered by Icy Cave Remaster for the meshes and Skyland for the textures. Solstheim has once again been covered by Raleigh's Solstheim All-in-One, as well as Rudy HQ more dramatic Red Mountain Plume, and Subtleties of Skyrim, which adds a tasteful smattering of fresh forbidden hot sauce to Red Mountain's slopes. It also adds distant ships and some extremely ash-hardy Emperor parasols on Vardenfell. And now, with the help of Red Mountain Plume visible from Skyrim, you can see all that from Skyrim too, as it should be. We love some juicy geologic action. And now, the foliage. Sweet Mara, the foliage. Grass is toggled back on for this, and I will undoubtedly miss some shrubs somewhere. I'd like to introduce everyone who didn't already know about it to a little mod called Tree Diversity Project, which is powered by Base Object Swapper and requires a little bit of setup and tweaking, so thoroughly read the mod page if you're going to try this one out yourself. Basically, it lets you combine nature of the wildlands, traverse the Ulvenwald, and optionally a third vanilla-style tree replacer, which is what I've done, plus a few tweaks. I started with Fabled Forests as my base tree mod because A, it uses happy little trees, but the, quote, moody teenagers version, which means it's an extremely performance-friendly base layer, and B, Fabled has built-in compatibility patches for just about any location you can think of. And because of the way Tree Diversity Project works, I only needed to worry about patching Fabled. Unless I did something like add back in some of Nature of the Wildlands forest debris, which I actually did do with an older debris-only patch because the newer forest fragments kept hosing my FPS. I'm mostly using the Swap Some Vanilla option from Tree Diversity Project, so there are a few trees here and there in each biome that are from both or either Ulvenwald and Nature of the Wildlands. I've gone an extra mile with the Morthal Swamps, using the mod Unique Marsh Trees and swapping them out for the spookiest selections from all 3 mods. I've also gone an extra mile and hand-placed a few specific trees from Ulvenwald, Wildlands, and Merkenwald, which I've definitely mispronounced, the Archwood Light. Mainly the small ones in the Archwood's case, just for a little more diversity in Falkreath. But I did throw in a few behemoths for extra canopy coverage. And yes, hand-placing things was actually the faster option, believe it or not. I've got a few forest density tweaks in a few places as well, notably Forest of the Reach, which adds pine trees to and helps fill in the reach between these somewhat spindly other conifers, and, conversely, mostly treeless tundra, which removes many of the trees from the Whiterun tundra and makes it more mammoth steppe-ish. Which makes sense to me, given the mammoths. In the Rift, I've also used the mod City Trees to add wild apple trees. On to the understory. All of the fallen logs, tree-based mushrooms, and most of the shrubs have been replaced with their Nature of the Wildlands versions, with Shrubbery Symphony, the non-base object swapper version for compatibility reasons, covering what Wildlands doesn't. Several smaller and some harvestable plants have been given the Cathedral 3D treatment, including tundra shrubs, stone crop, lavender, clovers, deathbell, and dragon's tongue, with Mari's flora handling many of the rest. Blue and red mountain flowers are the lupines and poppies from Mountain Flowers Reimagined, while the purple mountain flowers are Valart's delightful little bee plant. At least that's what they look like to me. I love them. And the yellow ones are Primula vulgaris, the common primrose, not to be confused with the evening primroses, Oenothera pallida, that I have growing in my own garden. And putting this script together was how I learned that Primula and Oenothera are not closely related genera at all. Plants, man! The grass for mainland Skyrim is my own grass patch, which I've called Relics Grass, inspired in large part by both QW's grass patch and my own local native plant communities. I used a combination of stuff from Cathedral 3D Pinegrass, Falkreath, Tamrielic grasses, Witchy Wilderness, and Arctic Tundra grass. Plus, an attempt by yours truly to make a Dryas octopetala. Because, if you haven't gathered already, I'm a huge nerd. It's a bit too tall, but an attempt was made. If you want to learn how to make your own grass patch, by the way, A, it's a lot of tinkering, and B, the author of the mod VERDANT has a tutorial lower down on the mod page, and I don't want to step on any toes there. Links are in the description. Relics Grass, as is, will not be released into the wild because I most certainly will continue tinkering with it as the series goes on. Solstheim is doing its own thing. It's covered exclusively by Dr. Jacobo's 3D Solstheim grass. And now, as much as I hate to, let's get out of the woods and go on a tour of the holds, shall we? Some parts of this will be more rapid fire than others, I suspect. Welcome to Solitude, capital of Skyrim. The textures are mostly Skyland, plus Rally Solitude roofs, and much of what you see is a combination of Dawn of Skyrim Director's Cut and Spaghetti City's interior holds only. I've also put in the Market of Zenithar statue because the guy gets so little presence elsewhere in Skyrim, and this statue feels like it just fits. Well, medieval markets add some extra life to, well, the market. Moving on, we can see a few extra buildings from Solitude Decorative Buildings, pared down so it only adds interior buildings, and the first of two of Drangen's Solitude mods that I'm using, his Bard's College rework. The second is just down the way, the Blue Palace Terrace, which to my surprise, given the name, also makes some gorgeous changes to the entry courtyard and the interior. Moving back toward the gates, we'll stop in at the new Winking Skeever, which is a pretty old mod actually, for a quick bite before we hit the road in earnest. I've done my best to patch this for window shadow consistency given that it rebuilds the interior from scratch, but it definitely still needs work on my part. Outside of Solitude, we'll be greeted by Solitude Weaver's Lane, and down the road we can see Drangen's Solitude Watchtower. Beyond that, I have the same setup as I had in my last series, featuring Solitude Docks Updated and Solitude Exterior add-on. Two other mods making a reappearance from my last setup are also spottable in this area, including Benches of Skyrim and Carriage Stops of Skyrim, both of which do what they say on the tin. Lanterns of Skyrim 2 is a new addition, but another one that we'll be seeing along the roads. Moving on south and passing one of Raleig's road signs reloaded along the way, we come to Dragonbridge, which is using Roderick's Dragonbridge as well as the walls of Dragonbridge. Across said bridge, we'll come to Dragonbridge Southside, which is also using new architecture tweaks and add-ons to give it meshes from Simplicity of Settlement's Dragonbridge. Mainly, I wanted the roofs to match Roderick's a little better. Last two mentions before we leave Haafingar Hold, I'm using a couple mods to add subtle interest to the trails of Skyrim without being too overly intrusive or a nightmare to patch. Skyrim Better Roads, Interesting Roads, and Improved Bridges of Skyrim, which, yes, also works with dirt bridges of Skyrim. There are a couple settlements I want to stop at before we head into the Reach, and they're both on the same road, with Robber's Gorge between them. One of them is Sky King's Markarth side, for which the only real change has been the removal of a few road chunks to fit with the dirt roads elsewhere. Robber's Gorge is once again covered by Engorged Robber's Gorge, which was also in my last list. And now, a brief stop in Rorikstead, which is using the lovely, extremely cozy Red Bags Rorikstead and Red Bags Rorikstead Enhanced. It also has a bit of foliage added by both city trees and a few of my own hand-placed trees. Just outside Rorikstead, we'll see a ruined Oblivion Gate added by Oblivion Gates AE, which, surprise, still works in SE, which is what I'm using, as well as one of a handful of Rin's Dragon Mounds. On to the Reach by way of climbing the hill. I'm still using Red Eagle Reborn in this list, mainly for the extra Forsworn decorations to the Nordic ruins in the area, which, while I'm here, are using the textures from Temples of the Ancients. With the series title of Ancients, I just had to. We'll also pass just south of Rin's Broken Tower Redoubt, where we'll be able to see some new meshes from Imperial Castles of Skyrim, Fort Battlements Remade. Across the river we'll find the great town of Karthwasten, plus a bit more fortification from the Walls of Karthwasten from the same mod author that made the Walls of Dragonbridge. Continuing down the road toward Markarth, we'll pass a recently sacked homestead, given new life by Environ's Kolskager mine. And now we come to Markarth, which has become potentially my favorite city in this list. Its outskirts have been frankenpatched together from Left-Hand Mine Overhaul, Markarth City of Old, and renewed exterior of Markarth reworked. It strikes the right balance with me of grand but ancient without being overly complicated or full of Periite's glowing globules for some reason. The city has been expanded vertically, at least visually, with Markarth City of Stone, and it uses textures from Stony AF Markarth and Dwemer pipework reworked. The interior of the city is once again largely Dawn of Skyrim and Spaghetti Cities, with the Markarth section of medieval markets patched out. I've also included Markarth Mossy Light, minus the most egregious of the glowing Periite globules. Technical term. Understone Keep has had a somewhat minor facelift, or roof lift, with the Understone Keep Excavations Daylight Enabler. It's also been cleaned up a bit by Understone Keep Foundations of Repair, and has had some clutter added on by Spaghetti's Understone Keep. And since we're in Markarth, let's stop by the Silverblood Inn, which showcases quite nicely some changes made by Friendlier Taverns, the older non-baths version. Continuing south along the road, we'll pass by the expanded Akaviri ruins of Rin's Karthspire, and get a sneak peek at the exterior of JK's Skyhaven Temple. Across the river we'll see the imposing facade of Dushnik Jarl from Orc's Strongholds all-in-one. Beyond that, we'll come to Old Hroldan, which has been expanded by Old Hroldan ruins and given an architecture upgrade by the great village of Old Hroldan. Now might be a good time also to point out the mod Nordic Runestones, which has been in my mod lists for a while now, possibly since Dawnbreakers. It just adds some extra Atmoran ambience, I think. At the crossroads between the Reach, Whiterun Hold, and Falkreath Hold, we'll find another of Sky King's settlement mods, Granite Hill, with a few extra decorations from Rugged Granite Hill, and some mesh changes from Northern Vanilla farmhouses. We'll also catch a glimpse in the background of another mod that I'll cover properly when we return to Whiterun later on. Continuing south, we'll pass a few points of interest, namely Half Moon Mill, which of course sits along Half Moon Creek, and shows off one of Rin's lumber mills. Down in the basin beyond, we can just about see some Ayleid ruins added by Pilgrim poking through a gap in the trees. We'll also find some more modern Nordic ruins along the road to Falkreath, added by the Falkreath module of Ruins Across Skyrim. We'll see a few more from this mod when we get to Morthal. Falkreath itself is covered by a combination of the great city of Falkreath, you may begin to sense a theme here, and unique farmhouse architecture Falkreath. This mod also applies mesh changes to Half Moon Mill, which you may or may not have noticed earlier, Pine Watch, which is just down the road, and Riverwood, which we'll see in a bit. Just uphill from Falkreath, at the border with Hammerfell, I've of course got the House of Trouble's Wilderness Hostel, which works surprisingly well with across-the-border, unique border gates. We'll take a shortcut through the woods, around the lore-friendly Guardian Stones, past the Riverwood Falls, and into Riverwood proper. Riveting Riverwood specifically, which adds a few little touches here and there, like the small graveyard up the hill. I'm also using two of It's Ivy's mods here, the Gates of Riverwood and the Riverwood Apothecary. The Sleeping Giant Inn has also been given a cozy upgrade with Rin's Sleeping Giant Inn, which is the only one of Rin's interiors that I'm using. Rather than head up the road to Whiterun, let's take the back road out of Riverwood and around Helgen, through the mountain pass to Ivarstead. Along the way, we'll pass a Stormcloak outpost, made significantly more imposing by reinforced Civil War camps. On the other side of the pass, we'll pass the completely unaltered Alchemist's Shack, as well as Honeystrand Grove, which is now an actual grove. Ivarstead hasn't changed too much from my last mod list. It's still the great town of Ivarstead, this time with the addition of a couple hand-placed trees, and the Falls of Ivarstead, which is the other water logic mod I mentioned earlier in the video. While we're here, let's take a quick run up to High Hrothgar, sneakily avoiding Yeti, High Hrothgar Troll Den, and any spoilers about what pilgrims might run into here. High Hrothgar itself isn't terribly ostentatious, mainly featuring some small-scale clutter upgrades from Spaghetti's High Hrothgar. Textures are, of course, Skyland. Heading back down the path and toward Riften, we'll pass a few notable places. First, we'll see lore-friendly ruins of Nemalton, followed by some additions to the outside of Angervund, added by northern scenery Angervund. Across the river from this completely innocuous thieves' house is the Redwater Brewery, which is just west of Autumnshade Clearing, which I've added to myself with Bard's Little Touches, Glades and Groves, which adds some of these ancient shrines to a few other sprigging groves around Skyrim. Back across the river, which is now mostly just Lake Honrick, we'll see Rin's Golden Glow Estate just before we reach the city of Riften. The first thing we'll notice about it is the expanded docks, courtesy of Lake Town, a Riften Docks expansion, followed by JK's Riften Outskirts. We'll also be able to see a few watchtowers from Riften, Make Your Own Riften. And it looks like we have one of our local intrepid caravans out in front of the city, with their camp spiffed up by Khajiit Has tents, and the caravaneers themselves given a little added fur stock diversity by Project Jacques Caget. Inside Riften, you may struggle to figure out what specifically is going on here. This is primarily not bigger, just better Riften, which has been thoroughly frankenpatched to work with alternate Riften, revived and optimized, build your own Riften, and medieval markets. I'm extremely sure I've missed a few things. I haven't, however, missed out pointing out the Riften Garret, which is just up there, and has a great view of the rest of this slightly soggy chaos. Down in the Ratway, we'll find JK's Ragged Flagon and Thieves Guild HQ. And of course, if we leave Riften through the Riften Gate Restored, I also have JK's Nightingale Hall to complete the Thieves Guild set. Heading back to the road north using the Riften Detour, we come to Fort Greenwall, which you may find to be an odd stop, but it's because there's another of my own mods, Greenwall Chantry Ruins, lurking underneath. This one most likely won't be released into the wild because it's my first attempt at level design, and it very much shows. It's not even properly nav-meshed. Think of it more like a film set, which I've included in this list so nobody wonders if it's part of something else. And for our last stop in the Rift, we have, of course, the Great Village of Shorestone and the Great Village of Shorestone Enhanced for a bit of extra clutter. I added this one in specifically because it includes Fallowstone Hall, which is somewhere you can visit in ESO, and probably hasn't crumbled too much in the last 1,000-odd years. And speaking of things that have been around for 1,000 years, one of the first things we'll see when we hop down the hill and into the volcanic tundra is this twisted hunk of Daedric metal from the Plate Meld in the Second Era, added by Dark Anchor's ruins and dolmens. If we continue through the geysers and hot springs to the west, we'll find both the great village of Mixwater Mill and Darkwater Crossing Great Towns and Cities add-on. Mixwater Mill has also been added to by Rin's Lumber Mills, and these two hamlets are exhibits A and B for why I had to use shrub replacers. Otherwise, I would have had happy little baby pines growing from the sod roofs here. Hopping back across the river, we'll head to Witchmist Grove, which is pretty obviously Hag, occult Witchmist Grove. Just beyond that, we have a bandit camp built in next to one of Rin's dragon mounds. This is as good a time as any to note the mod Old Hold's Cold Welcome, which gives the enemies of the Rift, Eastmarch, Winterhold, and the Pale their own specifically Nordic flavor, which will hopefully make the gaggle of mostly outsiders I'm about to be playing feel even more unwelcome. Getting back on the road now, we arrive at, you probably guessed it, the great town of Kynesgrove, which has been given some extra flora by city trees, but remains otherwise untouched. Just over the hill is of course Windhelm, the outskirts of which have been significantly overhauled by JK's Windhelm Outskirts and Rin's Farms. I also have Windhelm Exterior altered, Windhelm Bridge reforged, the wooden roofs from Windhelm Bridge revived, and Vanilla Plus Windhelm entrance running because after playing with Capital Windhelm expansion for the last series, the exterior seemed just a smidge bare. Yes, this is the result of another of my Frankenpatches. Windhelm's textures are Ancient AF Windhelm, and the combination of Dawn of Skyrim, Spaghetti Cities, and Medieval Markets again. I also have Leaf Eater's Windhelm Tree Overhaul, and the Grey Quarter Overhaul running. While most of the city looks as inhospitable as it usually does, the Palace of the Kings has been made more grand with Palace of the Kings renovation. Moving on from Windhelm and heading toward Whiterun, we'll take the stretch of no man's road that technically belongs to the Pale. Along the way we'll pass Anga's Mill, another of Rin's lumber mills, and head on up to Sevence's Heljarchen Creek, a small town which of course includes the Nightgate Inn, and our first taste of what's waiting for us in Dawnstar. Across from it we'll see the impressive sculptures added to Ironbind Barrow by Northern Scenery Ironbind Barrow. If we take a peek just south of the town, we'll see one of Fuzzbead's gorgeous giant camps, of which I'm using all but, I believe, one. And speaking of Fuzzbead, just down the road we'll find the Waynan Stones, which was honestly a place I didn't realize existed until I saw his overhaul for the location, the Pride of Cullacane. Across the road we'll find Corvinud, the exterior of which has been given a bit more interest by the mod Nordic Ruins of Skyrim SE. And now we come to the heart of Skyrim, Whiterun. I've once again gone with JK's Outskirts, which works very well alongside Rin's Farms. There are many animals that we can see in the farms and tundra outside of the city. Nordic cows for the domestic cows, and wild cows, covered by dynamic animal variants Mihale's cows, for some renamed and lightly resized wild aurochs. The elk in the area are in fact real megaloceros of Skyrim, because I'm a huge nerd. The horses are from Steeds of Skyrim, and of course I couldn't leave out flying crows or my beloved thickens. I still can't believe they're actually realistic. Entering the city, we'll see a tiny but sweet mod called Whiterun Exterior Add-on, which just adds lanterns to the bridge here. We also have a bit of added defense from both Walls of Whiterun and Whiterun Defensive Stockade Walls. I find these two in combination keeps the somewhat old and crumbling lore while making it look like the city is a little more prepared for a potential siege. The interior of Whiterun is once again a Frankenpatch, with Dawn of Skyrim, Spaghetti Cities, and Medieval Markets appearing again, this time with the added complication of Cato's Whiterun. I also have the Whiterun Market Archway, which will likely never leave my load order, and unique Gildergreen, which really makes it look like this poor tree's been through some trouble. Textures are mostly Skyland, with a few of Boreal Whiterun's wood textures overriding it. Before we leave Whiterun, let's stop by Dragon's Reach, which, to tie it in a little more with Rorikstead, is of course using Redbag's Dragon's Reach. Also, JK's Jorvasker is making a return from my last series. Back out in the tundra, we'll pass the Western Watchtower, which will hopefully not stay ruined. With the help of Environs, Whiterun Watchtower doesn't stay broken. We'll also see a new abundance of ancient Nordic ruins, with lore-friendly Bleak Falls North and Northern Scenery Tundra, from which I've patched out the giant aqueducts while leaving the rest of the ruins. One of which frames an ancient shrine of Stune, added by the Old Ways Nordic religion. Elsewhere in the tundra, we can find a few ruins spruced up by Watchman's Whiterun Hold secondary locations, as well as the sleeping Hist tree. Around here is also where I most often find examples of petroglyphs of Skyrim, which was in fact a mod I downloaded and tested about 5 minutes after it was originally uploaded, and have been waiting to use ever since. Because I'm a huge nerd, and they are at least plausibly lore-friendly. We'll cut through the pass behind Drealis's cottage and head on down to Morthal. I'm using lightly fortified Morthal for these wonderful archways, as well as Simplicity of Settlements Morthal and No Morthal Snow redone. There are 2, or 1.5, additional buildings in this setup. Where's Wares, which adds Where She Goes and her general goods shop, and Environ's Hrogar's house, which will eventually see Hrogar's house get repaired. Just outside of town, we'll be able to see another swamped-over Oblivion Gate, and the other ruin from Ruins Across Skyrim. Down the road, we'll find yet another reappearing mod from my last series, Stone Hills by Schlitzohr, whose name I'm certainly mispronouncing. Nearby, we'll find Fuzzbead's Frostmere Crypt, formerly Frigid Frostmere Crypt, from his Creepy Caverns collection. Dawnstar's entrance has 2 particularly old-looking additions, suitable for what is most likely one of the oldest Atmoran settlements in Skyrim, the first of which is my own Dawnstar Whalebone Arch, inspired by another mod that does something similar, but way more of it. The other is Stave Church 2024, of which the Dawnstar one is the only one I'm using, which adds an old and surprisingly cozy Temple of Stune to the outskirts. Dawnstar itself is using, as you might be able to tell, a combination of Cities of the North Dawnstar and the Great City of Dawnstar. This is maybe the city I had the hardest time with as far as finding it a unique identity beyond cold farmhouses and a port. But then I saw the whale skeleton inside the inn and went, that'll do. We'll continue along the coast toward Winterhold, along which we may find a few of Skinwalker 21's trilobites because I'm a huge nerd, and stop briefly at the Sarthal excavation, which has been expanded by Greater Sarthal for SSE. Up the path we'll come to Winterhold Restored, which works beautifully with Winterhold Gate SE. For the college, I've gone back to Obscure's College of Winterhold, which I was using at the end of Dawnbreakers, but never really got to experience while running through the quest. It's using the beautiful textures from Praedy's College of Winterhold. Now let's look at the DLC added spaces, starting across the pond on Solstheim. All 3 of Solstheim's settlements use Spaghetti's Solstheim. No, I will not be trying to say that 5 times fast. Raven Rock also has a new layout courtesy of Raven Rock Reimagined. Telmithrin is using JK's Telmithrin. And the Skull Village is using Eleonora's Skull Village overhaul for some real Blood Moon looking architecture. And finally, back in and around Skyrim, Fort Dawnguard and Castle Vogahar are both using their respective JK's mods, while the Forgotten Vale has had a few extra points of interest added by Unmarked Locations pack Forgotten Vale. Plus, one skeleton, added by repurposed ivory armor, which I didn't purposefully stick under this pillar, and I'm honestly surprised it worked out as well as it did. And that, I think, is that, as far as what's making everything, or almost everything, in Skyrim look the way it does. I hope you found some inspiration, or at least enjoyed wandering around Skyrim with me for the last, hopefully under an hour. Thanks again to the very generous and ever-patient patrons. I'm gonna go rest my voice now. But wait, who's that's been running around showcasing mods with us? Well, that, my friends, is a secret. Keep on keeping on. I'll see you in Ancients.